And welcome to this week's IG Live. Thank you for joining us at a different time. We have a very special IG Live for you today to start 2025 off right. We're going to be interviewing Dr. Carlotta A. Berry, and we're going to be talking to her about her books for children that help encourage kids to get involved in STEM professions. Especially, she is very passionate about diversifying who is in STEM, and she's an electrical and computer engineer and professor. She's a researcher, educator, speaker, and author, and we are so excited she's taking time to talk with us today. And hang on just a second while I get her on here for you. Noir STEMinist, which is one of my favorite names. So you can find her there online. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear and see me okay?
Yes.
Hi.
Perfect.
Hi.
Hi. Let me put this down low.
This is
How are
my
you doing today?
first time going live on Instagram, so I was a little concerned.
Well, you did it perfectly. So, although I wouldn't expect less from an engineer.
Thank you.
Oh wait, I shouldn't say that. Everybody's allowed to make mistakes, but you did great. So
Thank
we're
you.
so happy. I'm honored that you would choose this for your first IG Live.
Thank you.
Well, why don't we go ahead and jump in, and you can introduce yourself and tell us. I kind of mentioned all the different things that you do. You're primarily an engineer and a professor, but you also write children's books. So how did that come about?
Absolutely. So it was during the pandemic, to be honest. And I was working with some colleagues, and we were talking about what are some innovative ways that we could market more STEM to diverse audiences, because we think one of the biggest problems with engineering is it has a marketing problem. You think engineer, you think Dilbert, you think MacGyver, you think things like that. So we wanted to come up with a way to do that where we hook it with people, but it's not overly nerdy or STEMmy, because that's one of the stereotypes, is that if I'm not a super genius or a math genius, then I shouldn't be an engineer. And so one of the first things I wrote was actually romance novels. So I write romance novels where all the main characters are women in STEM. And it's just about them living their everyday lives, just to get people used to seeing women in STEM. And then this year that just finished, I was the inaugural scientist at the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. And after I would do my presentation, I would have parents and people at the museum go, God, you should really write children's books about the topics that you're teaching the kids. And then I had to be honest and tell them I actually wrote some books during the pandemic. I just never published them. And so because people kept asking, I was like, let me just go and dust off those old drafts and get them ready to publish. And out of that, there's a robot in my closet. I actually dreamt up that title, was the first book that I published, and that was in March.
That was just March of this past year, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so for anybody who hasn't looked, I mean, you have a whole series of books and they all came out like boom, 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 right in a row,
Right.
this whole series. And I think now you've started a second series, right?
I have robot explorations because I have had people ask me, what about for older kids? I struggle a little bit with older kids because I know, like, my daughter's in high school. Once they get to a certain level, they don't really want to read those kind of books. They want to read comic books
Right.
or manga or graphic novels. So I'm writing books a little bit older, but I'm not quite to that middle school yet. So these older books are the Robot Exploration series, and they're for about maybe first grade to maybe fourth or fifth grade. But yeah, I would like to eventually get to the point where I can write something for those older kids as well. It's just a matter of trying to visualize exactly what would resonate with
Right.
them.
Right. And something that you kind of mentioned this already that I thought was really interesting about your books is, like you said, it's not just the characters, of course, are very diverse, but it's not just that. They don't meet expectations in other ways. Like one of my favorite ones is there's a robot in my Afterschool, and the main character is a young black boy, but he's very active and he loves sports. Or in some of the other books that, a girl uses a robot to play music and do a light show. It's all kinds of things that you wouldn't normally think about. Why is it so important for kids to see that kind of representation?
I think those intersections are important. I actually had a post today because I've had people debate with me, why are they now adding art into STEM? What is up with this STEAM thing? And that just does not seem like a good fit. And it's an absolutely good fit. And that is another example of how people are running kids away from STEM who should not be run away. Because I was saying to someone, if you have an architect who designs an ugly building, nobody wants to live in that building. Or if you have someone who designs an ugly bridge, nobody wants to use that. or more in my field, the uncanny valley is when people make robots that are so creepy, nobody wants to be near them. So it doesn't matter if you have this really cool robot that works excellently if people are scared to be around it because looking at it just kind of so there is nothing that says being creative and artistic is not STEM. It absolutely is.
Oh, and you got a
The intersection
message
of
from
those two.
esteemed teacher. Thank you for celebrating us. Thank you for what
Yes,
you do.
absolutely. Because I tell my students all the time, how do you think you come up with ideas in engineering? Being creative, being innovative. I'll tell them, I've come up with more ideas driving to work, cross stitching, playing music, painting. While you're doing those things, I'm reflecting on other things like, I could make X better with this. And it's the intersections that help you to do that. You don't want an engineer who is sitting somewhere in a cubicle and does not expose themselves to anything else to be well rounded. Their ideas will not work for more people. I
Oh,
sing in class as well. I saw that. I sing in class all the time. My students think I'm crazy, but yeah, I do. I sing in class as well.
well, and
But
maybe
yeah,
we could talk about that your books kind of fit into this larger project that you have. I know you've used like hip hop poetry and a lot of other means to kind of engage people and get them involved in. And I
yes,
think you have, is it like the kitchen sink
yeah.
science projects and things like that? Because like you said, I read that you said that it's really a PR problem, and that a lot of times things that are engineering people don't think of
People
like
don't see it as engineering. I had this whole series on New Year's Eve about where do you see algebra and where do you see complex numbers in the world? Because people were like, I have no idea why they made me learn complex numbers in high school.
right.
And the example I gave the young lady was my husband has been playing fantasy football the entire time we've been married. He has to come up with the statistics for each person, how many points for this, how many points that I don't know anything about football. And I was like, that is a big algebra problem. That's what it is. But until you explain it to people like that, they'll go, I never used any of this math I learned in high school.
Right.
Actually, you did. you know,
I love that because I hear that I homeschool my kids, and that's something they say to me, why do I have to learn this? I'm never going to use this. So what is this? What is this even for? So
right.
I love that answer. And maybe to go back a little bit to about your books, because I want to make sure we get to talk about those, is that they also teach these other qualities like persistence, thinking outside the box, problem solving. What do you hope that the young readers take away from your books?
So a lot of that are part of the engineering design process and the scientific design process, and I'm sneaking those in. I actually some of the books, in fact, my most recent one of them, "What's the Matter with Orbit," was originally pitched to a school, a bookseller who was looking for people who could write books about the engineering design process for littles, and they
Mm-hmm.
wanted the kids to solve the problems, not the adults. So if you see, that's why a lot of my books have those themes, because those are the exact same themes that you would see in the formal engineering design process that we teach our freshmen in engineering. Identify a problem, brainstorm solutions, test out those solutions, figure out which one works the best, etc. One of the biggest challenges I have, even with our engineering students now, is some of them are now showing up for college to be an engineer, and they've never had to solve their own problems. And a big part of me being a good engineering professor is I'm not going to keep walking over to you and go, you put that wire in the wrong place. You left the semicolon off your code, because it's the fish thing. If I show you how to fish, you eat for a lifetime. If I keep telling you how to fish, I'm going to keep feeding you. So by
Right.
doing that with young people, I tell parents all the time, they don't need expensive robots. They don't need expensive toys. They need you to take something apart and ask them, can they figure out how to put it back together? It could be a pen, right? It could be anything in their house, but giving them those creative problem solving qualities, that's what makes them into an engineer. They don't need any high tech iPads or anything like that. Just something that shows perseverance, endurance, and solving their own problems. One of the challenges I had with the book and why I ended up self publishing it is when they rejected the book, they told me that they felt like robotics was not for kids from difficult socioeconomic backgrounds. It was not replicable. It was not repeatable. It was not expandable. And I found all of that very offensive, because that's my whole shtick
Right.
is to write things that are accessible to all people, low cost robots, low cost information you can put online, not put behind a paywall or a firewall, so that people can see that. I've probably given away as many books and robots as I've actually sold, because I don't want people to say this knowledge I would love to share with my kiddo, but I don't have the resources to do that.
And that goes back to the book I was talking about. There's a robot in my after school. This is a kid who uses, he doesn't have a robot at home, but he's using it in his after school program,
Yes,
which is kind of
absolutely.
normalizing that, using it at school, which is how a lot of kids are going to access it.
3D printing as well. I met some young people who told me they go to the public library to 3D print. I was like, okay, I can give you some files and you go to the library, book time on the machine in the library and print out your own
Mhm.
robot. Right. So it doesn't have to be something like, wow, if I don't have this stuff in my house, I just can't do it. So it's the main reason I do things on YouTube and
Mhm.
social media. I actually was doing things on a lot of platforms. And then I had a parent tell me, if you want to get to the kids, you need to get on the TT. And I was like, really? And they were like, well, that's the only thing my daughter uses, right? And so me as an engineer, I had to learn how to use the different kinds of social media
Mhm.
because I did want them to be able to access this. And as soon as I did that, I got a high school teacher in Detroit who reached out to me and said, I saw one of your posts and I would like your files to print some of these for my classroom. And she did.
So I'm curious, what kind of reaction have you gotten? Is it mainly hearing from parents, teachers? Like what are they telling you?
It's mostly parents and teachers.
Mhm.
Um, I get a lot of, I've never seen books like this before. I don't see a lot of books with black and brown kids on the cover
Mhm.
doing robotics, doing STEM, doing engineering. I did a book fair one time and I had a parent walk around and they came to my table, said, oh, you're first. Let me walk around and then I'll decide what I want to buy. And then she came back. She said, I walked this whole venue and you're the only books like this. And I was
Right.
like, yeah, that was part of it is I did. And I had some girls come up to the table one time, some little girls, and they counted my books and they were like, you've got more girls on the cover than boys. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
right. But I've also done some science events where, because I always have the robots with me. Whenever I'm selling books, I always have robots either on the floor, on the table that are driving around so the kids can play with them. And I had one young lady who was playing with a robot, and her parents came up and go, oh, this is great. Let me go get her brother. We'll be right back. And I was like, what a missed opportunity. She was right
Mhm.
there.
Yeah. What do you see as being some of the barriers that you run across with getting kids interested? Is the problem getting kids interested, or is the problem that, like you just said, like adults don't think that they'll be interested?
A little bit of both. And that's all stereotypes. It's all stereotypes. And a little bit of even when they are interested, research shows that around middle school, they start to get turned away.
Hmm.
Sometimes they feel like it's not a welcoming environment. So even if you do have a little who's really excited about math and science, you have to continue to encourage and grow that because unfortunately, unfortunately, may encounter a teacher who thinks that, this is really more for the boys, or if they join the robotics team, the boys kind of take over and kind of alienate them, or girls don't normally like that hyper competitive environment. They don't mind being on a robotics team, but why do we have to be so aggressive about it? I was the coach mentor of my daughter's Girl Scouts first Lego League and first robotics team for several years because we didn't want them to experience that. When it was all them together, it was a very encouraging environment. Then they had, once they got their confidence up, they were able to join the robotics team at
Right.
school. And a couple of those young ladies are now in their high school robotics team and doing great. But having some of those formative years be a time where they know your opinion is value, your designs are important, you can code, so that once you do get in some of those environments where you may be around somebody who says things like girls can't do math or black and brown kids aren't good at science. Oh, yes, they are, because I know. I've seen it and I've done
Right.
it.
Right.
So I think that's also a big part of it. And believe it or not, even in college, I've had students come to me after their first day of school. One young lady came to me and said, I think I'm going to go home now. And she made it all the way through high school to college
Uh,
because she said she had a couple of negative experiences in her first class of the day as a
mm,
freshman or a first year student. And, it's like, nope, you're going to get your hind end back in there and you're going to tell them to shut their mouths is what you're going to do. Of
right.
course she did, and she graduated. But it's just the fact that those things still happen in this day and time where people will question your ability
Mhm.
and whether you should be there. So I always say representation
Right.
matters. You can be what you cannot see, but it's a lot easier if you can see it.
Right. Right. And I imagine her being able to go to you as a professor made a
Yeah.
huge difference in her confidence in being able to do it.
And the craziest part is she wasn't like my student, not my advisor or anything. I had just taught her earlier that morning, and she thought enough. that when she decided she was going home, let me go see that professor I saw this morning, and I'm going to tell her. Of
Yeah.
course, the rest of the professors throughout the day were probably men, but it's just like what is going on? We have been here all of a day. There's no crying in
Yeah.
engineering. Actually, there is, but
Well, so I'm interested, you know, like you said, we have this bigger project about diversifying and encouraging kids and as they go through to adulthood. So what made you decide to do, or what do you think it is about children's books that's such an effective way to reach children? Now, obviously, that's not the only thing you're doing. As you mentioned, you have the YouTube videos,
yeah.
you're at the science museum or at the museum. Um, but what about books and having like putting it in a story format? Because you could have done like a nonfiction book. What made you
Absolutely.
decide to do it like as a children's storybook?
It's just so fun.
Mhm.
And the look that I see on kids' faces when I'm like at the museum, at the library, at a school, they're like, oh, there's a robot. They all know what a robot is.
Yeah.
I don't know where they, maybe it's a cartoon on TV. I don't know. But the look in their eyes, they get so excited. And I
Mhm.
wanted it to be fiction because I want them to let their imagination run wild. That's actually the
Yeah.
dedication at the front of one of my books is I hope this book inspires you to let your imagination
Mhm.
run wild. And by being fiction, I can do that. My most recent book, there's a robot at my playground.
Mhm.
I have a writing mentor because when I first started writing, it was no bueno. Being an engineer and a technical writer, I was not, obviously, I didn't know how to write fiction at all, romance or children's books. So she helps me a lot. She's a preschool teacher. And so I always send her the illustrations before we put it together. And there's a picture in the book where the robot is riding on the seesaw with the little girl. And they're going up and down. And I wrote her and I said, okay, are we going to try to figure out how in the world the robot gets down? I was like, no, let's go with it. So because you can be creative. Maybe his arms are going to grow, because I'm sitting
Right.
here like, we have no thought. The physics of this just doesn't even work.
Right.
But but it's all about your imagination and being creative, which is part of being a good engineer.
Mhm.
And so with fiction, I can do that. Like when I read the book, There's a Robot in My Closet. I don't know how it got in the closet. Nobody knows. And
Right.
how is it that nobody knows? She's going around the house telling everybody there's a robot in her closet. And her parents are like, okay. Nobody's
Yeah.
kind of like, well, how did this robot magically
Right.
get in her closet? Right.
I love, well, actually, that brings me to one of my questions because a thread that I noticed in your books is that a lot of times the kid is really excited about the robot, but not everybody else is. Sometimes not even their family or adults. Sometimes
Yeah.
they are. Sometimes the parents are like, I'm busy, I'm on the phone, I'm making dinner, you know. But definitely the other kids are not interested. So, what message do you have for kids or advice for either for the kids themselves or for the adults in their lives, how to encourage it, even when other people around you might think, oh, that's so nerdy, or why are you doing that? That's boring.
I want the kids to be able to be the STEM ambassador, and I'm also sneaking in some messages as well, like the after school
Mhm.
book. It's about the kids and the cell phones. I know that's a big one right now. The
Right.
screen time, the iPads, the cell phones, and they're missing out on some really, really cool things. And so I wanted Malachi, who's the main
Mhm.
character, he's trying to tell his friends that they're busy on their phones or
Right.
playing on their computer. You're missing out on some really awesome things in the world. I've done workshops for kids where I had a kid walk in and go, I don't want to do this. Robot's kind of scaring me. I'm not interested. Then the first time they write code and get that robot moving on the floor,
Ah,
I did that. Yes, you did that, right? You did that. So to get them to see that this is something you can do. Yes, the adults are cool, but you can do this too. Nobody's making you do it. You are becoming a creator of technology, not just a consumer of technology,
yeah.
right? And that's so important.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, because the kids who are on their phones or using iPads, they're also using technology, but it's really different. Like you said, they're more like
It's
they're having to create it rather than
passive.
right.
Although we know like Minecraft, Roblox, they are building, they are creating. So there is some of that as well. But I think there's also something about being able to engage with something in your physical
Right.
world. Like I have a video about a box bot made out of stuff around your house in a box and some stuff you add to it. I think there is some benefit for also being able to say that is also a way for you to engage physically in your world, not just on a computer. I actually am currently, spoiler alert, writing a book right now. There's a robot in my video game. And it's about a young lady who has a robot in her video game, and it's engaging with her and teaching her how to write the code to make the robot do things. And that was based upon a website that the Girl Scouts used when I was the coach of their robotics team, where they would learn how to code on the computer, and then the physical robot on the computer would show what it was going to do before they did it on the one on the floor. So there is some benefit to screens. I don't want to say I'm completely anti-screen time, but if they're creating and engaging and not just passively watching a YouTube video or something like
Right.
that.
Right. Yeah, I actually one of my sons is really into Roblox Studio where you are coding and doing
Yeah.
games. But I love the idea too about something that you're engaging with in the physical world. I agree. That does seem very different. And well, speaking of upcoming projects, so do you want to tell us a little bit about books that you're working on or other things
Mhm.
that you have coming?
Absolutely. So at some point I will go back to my romance novels, but right now I dream. I think I told you I dream a lot of ideas, and I just keep dreaming of ideas for children's books. So Robot Explorations right now only has one book. So I do have a few ideas for more books for that. And I love going to schools because when I go to schools, the kids actually give me ideas.
Oh,
So
nice.
you had mentioned Malachi, and you know that he's at his after school, and he designs his robot by adding 3D printed arms so he can catch his rebounds. I had a little boy and a little girl goes, what about soccer? What about football? And what about baseball? So I am writing another book that will be sports related. I don't want to all of my boy books to be sports though, because I want that girls can do sports and boys can do sewing, right?
Right.
So I don't want that to be a thing, but I do want to actually write that because the kids actually asked for it. They wanted a baseball robot, one who they designed to pitch the balls or whatever. So I haven't written it yet, but that's on the list because the kids asked for it.
Mhm.
And then I mentioned the video game one, and then I also recently wrote one about a little boy who is his name is Raheem. I always try to pick very, very, very ethnic names. I do that as well
Mhm.
because I don't go into a lot of detail in the book.
Right.
So visually, if you can't tell, then I want to do something like Miguel or Maria or Marisol, something so that it actually makes sense that these are diverse characters.
Right.
But the Raheem is at school, and he has STEM class, and the robot in his STEM class breaks. And because his teacher knows that Raheem has taken the robot apart and put it back together and knows the most about the robot, he tasks with Raheem to work with his classmates. Teamwork is another big thing in engineering,
Mhm.
to figure out how to fix the robot's name is Astro.
Mhm.
So Astro and the video game book are currently with the illustrator right now. So it is my hope that those will come out by the end of January. But yeah, so trying to get some of the more advanced books out. And I do have some ideas for the older kids.
Mhm.
I have pitched that book to a children's book company. And then if they reject that one, it will be self-published as well. So so that's what ends up happening with some of my books, is they're on hold because I do pitch them to people, because I see a lot of pitches about, can you write books about STEM, engineering design for kids of this age? I'm like, that's what I do.
Mhm.
I submit them, and then after 6 months, the query comes back rejected. And so
Right.
then it ends up becoming a book that I self-publish, because I think this stuff needs to be in the world more than I need to go. I'll just throw it in file 13 because it was rejected by a publisher.
And though, and what has your experience been with that? Is it usually, like you said, that they thought the books weren't accessible enough, or?
Not accessible, not well developed, not realistic. Like I got a lot of the not realistic for that when I told what's the matter with Orbit. And
Mhm.
I just was really intrigued by that, because I'm like, I do STEM events for kids. I do robotics with kids.
Mhm.
So to say something like, you feel this isn't repeatable, this isn't cost effective, kids from difficult socioeconomics wouldn't be able to do this. It made no sense to me.
Right.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
comment. We need your work in the world. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think it needs to be in the world more than I need to keep waiting on a book publisher. And I did. I queried for quite a while, and then I had somebody tell me, they're like, well, traditionally when you query books, it's 2 to 3 years before you get picked up.
Right.
That was the wrong thing to tell me, because I wasn't going to wait that long. So as soon as I got that, I was like, oh, let me go and start self-publishing these babies, because I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I probably would have waited longer, not knowing what the typical time was.
Right. Right.
But
Well,
yeah,
yeah. And so, I mean, do you feel like that's one of the advantages of self-publishing is that you can get it out a lot
I
more quickly?
can. And I can have those personal conversations with parents who go, this looks like my daughter. This looks like my niece.
Mm-hmm.
Representation matters.
Yeah.
Gail is one of my classmates. She's
Mm-hmm.
a teacher as well. But yeah, that, absolutely. That's a big one with me. I was at the Children's Museum and I had a parent one time, he was going back and forth about whether to get the book. And I said, and it was the Malachi book. And I said, well, actually, Malachi's hair looks just like your
Mm-hmm.
son's hair. And he goes, and he said, and actually, my name is Malachi. He's like,
Oh,
okay, I'm buying the book. And I,
I love it. And I bet he's probably never picked up the children's book that has his name in it
no.
or that has hair that looks like his son's. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's extremely important. I try to do this well. So my illustrator is on Fiverr. She's in Indonesia. And
Oh,
so I sometimes have to send pictures to her because I'm like, I need this stuff to be authentic. So, if I'm describing, a Chicago fade or something that is a traditional black hairstyle or whatever, I send her pictures. If you didn't like, if you look at Rashida's hair,
mhm.
Rashida is my cousin's name, by the way. And I also pick people's names I know. I said beads with braids. And I was like, if you don't know what, beads and braids are, let me send you some pictures of that because that's what I want her hair to look like.
Mhm.
Because we've sometimes gone back and forth with, no, that's not a good skin color. I had to go look up hex codes for skin colors to send her just to make sure it can be the most authentic because I do want kids to be able to see themselves.
I love that you take such care to do that and you have an illustrator who's wants to
Yeah.
get it right also.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for
Absolutely.
all that you do, and thank you
Thank
for taking
you.
the time to talk with us.
Yeah.
We put this out on social media and got such a great response from people about how they love the book, how they love the topic. So
Oh, thank
thank you.
you.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you for
for
having
taking the
me.
time to talk with us. And anybody who's joined us late, this is going to be up shortly on Instagram, and later we'll have it on our YouTube channel as well.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye
Bye.
bye.